Another window that you're going to spend a great deal of time in is the channel box. And we can gain access to the channel box if we click on the very top right icon here in our user interface. It kind of looks like a bunch of little lines and two dots. That is at the very top right. It's the last icon that you'll find. If I click on that, you'll notice the channel box opens up. Now, if you have nothing selected in your scene, you'll notice that this area is empty. But if I select something, for instance, like this polygon sphere that I just created, you'll notice that we get some very basic keyable channels loaded in our channel box. Things like translate, rotate, scale, and visibility. For visibility, we can simply type in number 0 to turn it off and the number 1 to turn things on. You can also type the word on and off. But let's go ahead and look at translate, rotate, and scale. Now, these things you're used to doing by simply using the move tool or the rotate tool. And as I change things on this polysphere, like its scale, you'll notice that those things are updating here inside the channel box. So if you needed to do something precisely, so for instance, this polytorus I have in my scene is kind of leaning to the side. I want to rotate this so that it's perfectly set, sitting up straight. And that would be somewhere maybe around 90 degrees. So you notice that in the channel box I have all sorts of different values set for this cylinder. I can then click over all of these values in rotation, type in the number 0, and then hit enter. And then if I wanted to rotate this 90 degrees in a specific axis, I could rotate it in Z by typing in 90 degrees in Z, and then hitting enter will also rotate that 90 degrees. You can also click on the word rotate in Z, so it's highlighted, and then in your perspective window, middle mouse button, click and drag left and right to go ahead and interactively change that value as well. You'll notice if I select this light here inside my scene, this point light, we can also look inside the channel box, and you'll notice there's a few additional attributes here in the channel box that we can work with, like intensity and color values. The channel box is kind of like the little brother of the attribute editor. So if I hit Control A, you notice the attribute editor also has color and intensity, but we do have a little bit more control over changing some of these things with color pickers and sliders, where the channel box is just a really quick way to gain quick access to some of these attributes. So very often in many of the upcoming tutorials we will access the channel box to change specific tools or attributes or values. So again, that's your top right hand icon. So the last thing I'm going to show you inside the channel box is the ability to change the initial state of specific objects. So for instance, I'm going to create a polygon sphere again. We'll bring this over into view and then scale it up a little bit. Now with this polysphere, you'll notice at the very bottom here we see polysphere 3. That's the name of this sphere that I've just created. I'm going to click on polysphere 3, and you're going to notice that we have a few attributes here for this. We have subdivisions on axes and subdivisions on heights. I can then click on the word subdivisions on axes, and again middle mouse button, click and drag and change very quickly and interactively the value for that. We will click on subdivisions on heights, and then middle mouse button, click and drag and update that as well. Underneath all these channelable and keyable options in the channel box, you'll notice that we do have our layer window here. And what layer windows let us do, if you're familiar with programs like Photoshop, is create layers, add specific pieces of geometry or lights or cameras or basically anything you have in your scene into that layer, and then turn the visibility off and on. So for instance, let me just hit the number 5 so I can go back to a shaded mode and turn off that light. If I select this polysphere and I go down to layers and click on the word layers, I have the option in the beginning to create an empty layer. I then have layer 1 located inside my layer palette. I could double click on the word layer 1 and name it. So I'll just call this sphere and hit save. And then I'll right click with my sphere selected on this layer. So right click on the word, and then we will add selected objects. You'll notice that right here in this first layer that I've created, we do have the letter V. If I click on that, that will quickly turn off and on the visibility of objects or anything basically in this layer. So it's a very fast way to add multiple objects to that layer and then change that layer. I'll grab this other sphere over here, right click on that layer, Add Selected Objects. And then if I hit the letter V again, you'll notice that both of those spheres are turning off and on. Now let's say that I don't want this cylinder and this poly plane here to be editable while I'm working inside the scene. I don't want to ever make a mistake and accidentally select it. So what I'm going to do is create another layer. So again, click on the word layers, create empty layer. You'll see layer 1 there. And I'll just call this other. And I'll even choose a color for it. So I'll choose the color blue and hit save. I'm then going to click on the polygon torus and the poly pipe tool and the polygon plane. Right click on the layer called other, and then again add selected objects. But this time, instead of clicking the letter V to turn off its visibility, you'll notice you have another box here that's empty. And I'm going to hit T for template. And when I do that, you'll notice that you get this wireframe of the poly pipe and plane, which can't be selected at any point. So it's a good way to kind of see what you're doing inside your scene, but then see this wireframe representation of those objects. We can also click that middle box one more time to go to reference mode, which means that I'll see them in their shaded state, but again, I can't select them. I can select other things, but not those objects inside there. Now, let's say, for instance, you want to remove the torus from this layer. I'm simply going to click that middle box again to unreference it, so I can select it. Then I will right click on the layer called other, and I will remove selected object. So you'll notice now if I turn off the visibility for that other layer, it's only going to affect the plane. And if I wanted to, I could click on the layer called sphere with my poly pipe selected, add selected objects, and then of course turn the visibility off for all three of these objects, or set them to template, or set them to reference.